Okay, so my clock says it's about 9:25, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Some of you may know that Gil is teaching retreat this weekend, and so I think part of the retreat time is happening now, so I'll be here with you this morning. It's nice to see people coming online. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the meditation? And as other folks come in, they'll just join our growing online group. So bringing yourself into the present moment, finding a posture that's upright and also relaxed. Maybe taking a couple of long, slow, deep breaths. And on the exhale, allowing the body to relax, soften. Sensing into the place where you're sitting, feeling your seat against the chair or the cushion, your legs or your feet against the floor. And just sensing that stability, the groundedness of being supported. And letting go into that. Softening various parts of the body. Perhaps starting with the face, the muscles around the eyes, the mouth, the jaw. Softening the eyes and the eye sockets. Down through the neck and the shoulders. Allowing the shoulders to drop down a bit, maybe the shoulder blades to slide down the back. Down through the arms and the hands. Just inviting some ease. And now sensing into the heart area, chest, the back, down through into the belly. And then softening the legs, letting go of any bracing all the way down into the feet. So just having a sense of sitting with some ease. And perhaps tuning into the sensations of breathing. Sense of the very simple physical sensations, like the coolness of the air coming in and sense of movement through the nasal passages, maybe the shift of clothing against the skin as the chest naturally rises on the in-breath. Sense that it's warmer on the way out. there can come to be a feeling of being breathed by the breath. So, not needing to breathe actively, but just letting your body be breathed. And that there's some, first of all, ease in just letting that happen, and also some vitality, some kind of strength in this very natural indication of life, breathing, however we're breathing. So, if it's of interest for this meditation, tuning into the aliveness, the energy, or the strength of just being in a body that breathes, that lives, seeing how that has an effect on the mind and body during this meditation. In the last few minutes of this meditation, you're invited to consider another kind of vitality. We've been sitting with the sense of life that comes from the breath, sense that the body is alive. What about the vitality that comes from the Dharma, from being connected to your Dharma practice and your sense of this path, of being part of this meditation community? These aspects of the Dharma also have some life to them, some feeling in the body of energy. See if you can tune into that and sense the flavor or the feeling of that for you, and rest with that, feeling how it connects with your own bodily vitality. We may also notice that it's when the mind and body are somewhat calm and somewhat gathered that it's the easiest to sense into this feeling of the Dharma within us. This Dharma energy is most available when our mind is somewhat settled. So good morning. It's nice to see that we have quite a few folks here, some not from this area. So I'll begin by bringing up two scenarios. One is that when people go on retreat, often at the end of the retreat, they'll say something like, how can I take this back into my regular life? How can I make what I felt here on retreat more a part of my daily living? And this is a very natural and healthy question that people have. I think we sense intuitively that we want the Dharma to pervade more of our life, in a sense, to fill out our life and become more of just our way of being. And this is actually the direction that the Dharma goes as the path just naturally develops. So as we keep practicing, the Dharma becomes broader and fuller. And then the second scenario is to say that people often want to deepen their practice. And in fact, that's Gil said recently that after having read decades of what people write on their little form before they come to a retreat is that the most common intention in coming to a retreat is to deepen their practice. So this is also a natural movement that we have as we're on the path, is that we want to have more concentration or just more ability to be non-reactive, or even to seek the deeper aspects of liberation that are pointed to in the teaching. This is also quite natural, is that the Dharma tends to become deeper and stronger as we walk the path. So the Dharma has some strength to it, and it also grows in both depth and breadth. So the Buddha gave teachings about this. He talked about 4 strong bases, or even sometimes they're called roads, by which the Dharma gains fullness in our life, and by which it strengthens our heart, enlivens our mind, and starts to pervade our whole life. So these 4 bases are things that we can kind of turn our whole being toward and use to direct our energy in practice, whether we're aiming for depth or for breadth at a given time. And I think we do both over the course of our practice. So these 4 are meant to be inspirational, to bring up a sense of, yes, this is the vitality behind my practice. This is the source of power or potential in my practice. We can gather ourselves around these 4 so that they infuse our path to liberation. So these 4 bases or roads are named as desire, energy, mind, and investigation. And I'm going to describe each one a little bit more, but I encourage, as you listen to the descriptions, to consider whether at this time one of them maybe stands out as especially alive for you right now or juicy for you right now. I have the sense that at a given time, a person's mind might be most attuned to 1 or maybe 2 of them. They're kind of related a little bit to our character and the way we approach practice. So in the Pali Suttas, these 4 are called the 4 Iddhipada, or 4 bases of power. That's the usual translation. So I'll talk about them first, and then I'll give some larger context to this teaching. So as I mentioned, the first of these is called desire, which is kind of a funny word to use in the Buddhist tradition, right? We're not supposed to be into desire, but this is a particular kind of desire. And the Pali word for it is chanda. And it's meant to be the kind of longing or calling that we feel, this desire for liberation. The mind has to want to walk on this path. It's hard enough that we need to have some desire there to do this. And so this is a kind of desire that's not really self-focused. It goes beyond our personal wishes. And so some people have even called it a calling. We may be on this path because we have some calling. Whether we can even explain it logically or not doesn't matter. It's this kind of desire that comes through the heart, Dharma desire. And then the second of these bases is energy. And the Pali word for it is virya. It appears in actually many lists, but when it's used here as a basis of power, this is kind of an upwelling of energy in the body and also in the mind, where we just have a sense of applying ourselves toward the path. There's a effort, but not in an effortful way. It's just, how else would we be using our energy? It just flows the way maybe a river flows down a channel quickly if it's well channeled. It's possible that the Buddha used this particular basis of power in his own practice. Of course, he had all of these in some ways, but Like when he sits down under the Bodhi tree and makes his vow that he will sit there until he's awakened. We may not be at that point in our practice, but that's a sense of energy, of really bringing the full energy. The third of these bases of power is mind. And the word is actually chitta, which is understood to be the heart and the mind together. It's there isn't such a distinction made in the ancient Indian tradition between the rational and the emotional side, or the heart and the mind. And so this chitta is meant to capture both of those. And in the case of using it as the basis for walking the path, this becomes something like wholeheartedness, a real sense of every part of my life is part of my practice. And everything that happens, I'm going to turn into the path somehow, using that lens, that sense from within of meeting our life completely with the Dharma. And this is more the kind of the chitta orientation of the wholeheartedness. It's all practice, it's all path. And then there's investigation, which is in Pali, it's vimamsa. And this is a sense of really wanting to understand the mind, really wanting to know what is the truth of how these things work. How does the mind work? How does life work? How does suffering work? That'll get us to the end. And really a deep curiosity and a wholesome, energetic investigation of experience, all the time curious about this life and how to live it well and how to awaken through it. This would be the basis of power. It's based in investigation, and we would pursue that, all the way to the end. So these bases of power are meant to be avenues of practice that could go all the way to full awakening. And in the texts, these four are said to emerge through samadhi, through gathering or concentrating of the mind. But in my own experience, they can be sensed anytime that the mind is relatively calm and balanced. We just have to know to listen for them. That's why I'm naming them all and asking for you to sense which one seems alive. And so also, there's this idea that when the mind is caught up in its hindrances, its wanting and not wanting, and torpor and restlessness and doubt and fear and all the things that come in, all of those things essentially amount to a binding up of our energy. They dissipate energy, they confine energy in ways that limit us. That's what they do, really. And so as those start to calm down, even in a simple way, like through half an hour of meditation, there's some freeing up of energy that comes from that. And that energy can be directed toward the path. If we have that intention, it can be freed up and directed toward practice. And so in that way, these four bases of power give us an indication of how to do that. And it also shows that they're actually very connected to the path. In fact, this is from one of the suttas. Buddha says, and what is the way leading to the development of these four bases of spiritual power? It is this noble eightfold path, namely right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So these avenues or ways that we would direct our mind are inherently connected to, I would almost say infused into the path. So they're informed by wisdom, informed by all the factors that we're practicing with. And that's important to understand because some of these movements of the mind can really feel quite strong. Even just hearing about them today, you might have felt kind of a pull in your heart, maybe, especially toward whichever one is resonating for you at this time. So there's no need to fear this feeling of strength if it's informed by these other factors of the path. Particularly, I would say two of them are particularly important. One of them is wise view, or wise understanding. So the sense that we're on the path for the purpose of not doing harm in the world, not no longer bringing harm to ourselves or to others. So a sense of harmlessness, compassion, and also the understanding that our actions, the way we comport ourselves in body and also in mind, is has consequences. It's effective in a sense, and so we would want to always direct our energies well. In the service of wholesome qualities and in the service of letting go of our unwholesome qualities or our challenges. So this kind of understanding is important. And also the sense, of course, that we're moving away from suffering. So we can always check our actions that if they're leading toward or away from suffering. This is also part of wise understanding. And then the second path factor that's probably especially important is wise mindfulness. So having some capacity to check our practice and be aware of how it is that we're walking the path and how it is that we're conducting our practice. And then I have a lot of faith that mindfulness has kind of a balancing effect. And so as we walk the path, inevitably, we go a little bit too far this way or a little too far that way. We get caught up in something and then we realize what's happening and come back. That happens all the time along the path. But as long as we have wise mindfulness, there will be that correction, that reorientation as we go along, doing all the things that we need to let go of in our heart and mind in order to be free. So the Dharma is powerful. It brings all the factors of our mind and heart together. And as we bring our understanding of this path to the way that we're walking the path, then we begin to see that these components of the bases of power are not very personal. So I even said in the case of desire, it's not really about our personal wishes. It's about the Dharma wanting to move forward, wanting to express itself. And that's the case for all four of them. They start to have the sense that the Dharma is doing this and not me, not my own gain or my own personal wishes. But this is somehow a movement of the natural way that the Dharma moves through us. It has this energy to it. So these are not really our personal wishes or endeavors. So as we do this, we allow the Dharma to unfold. I like that word, unfolding. It has a sense of starting somewhere, maybe a little bit internal or a little bit like a flower bud. And then it opens a little bit. And as it opens, it gains a little bit more connection to the world, first of all, but also a little bit more strength, sort of comes more into fullness. And then from that little step that's been taken, there can be another unfolding. And I don't know how far the unfolding goes. It's, I think we can keep unfolding for quite a long time. So I heard one teacher sum up these four bases of power in this way. He said, fullness, strength, humanity. I liked that a lot, those three words together, fullness, strength, and humanity. When those are the way that our practice is infused, it has a lot of powerful effects. So because these bases of power are connected to the path, and particularly to wise intention, the intention of compassion, the intention of loving kindness, of non-harm, we can have no sense of conflict between kindness and compassion and making strong effort and bringing power to the path. So there's another of the eight that is important to bring in, is the intention, so that there's a sense of wholeness and also softness. As we walk on the path, we become not only stronger and sort of more capable in certain ways, there's also a softening. So there's always this balance of the softness and the strength and the continued unfolding into a flower. Flowers are both soft and give this image of strength. There's a book by Ajahn Pasano called Don't Hold Back. It's interesting, right, that a monk who lives by the rules of renunciation, by a very simple lifestyle, would then write a book called Don't Hold Back. He'd be giving this message of not holding back. But this is the essence of fully engaged practice, is that it infuses our whole life, and that even as we are completely committed to restraining our harmful habits, there's a fullness and a strength that comes from that. And this is the depth and the breadth that I talked about that we naturally want through practice. So please consider whether one or another of these infuses your practice and feels inspiring to your heart on this day. So desire, energy, mind, and investigation. And maybe some way that they could be infusing your life at this time. So I said that I would talk first about these 4 bases of power, and then I would give a little bit more of the Dharma context for them. And let's go into that now. So these are the bases of power, the Iddhipada, and they do actually tie into the ancient Indian understanding that there is the attainment of various supernormal powers through meditation. Remember that in that culture, there were a group of people who lived outside of society and had devoted their life really to practicing a lot of different methods or techniques of meditation. Buddha was also in that group, who was kind of outside of society. But so he acknowledged, that these psychic powers and various things were possible through practice. He acknowledged that because it was already common knowledge in that society. It seems, sort of maybe more novel to us. But these are things that we will have heard of in other spiritual contexts, these powers. So there are things like walking through solid objects, walking on water, flying through the air, other feats that might appear miraculous to an average untrained person. You might be saying now, what does this have to do with the Buddhist teachings? Things like mindfulness and metta and insight. So hang on. First of all, it is worth considering that the mind has a lot more capability than we typically allow ourselves to believe. We have very little idea of what our mind is capable of. And I think it's important now and then to consider that the full capacity of the mind is really quite vast. And in fact, understanding that the mind probably has a lot of these kinds of potentials, I would say is part of wise view, part of understanding what is the potential for the mind to release its habits and its suffering and open into more of what its full potential is. But in the Buddha's characteristic way, he included understandings from his time. He kind of wrapped them into his teachings, but he found a way to skillfully direct them toward what he wanted to teach, which was what is wholesome and what leads toward liberation. So the Buddha didn't deny the psychic powers or the kind of special knowledges that can come through practice, things like being able to see far away, hear things far away, they're called the abhinya, these kind of deep understandings of how mind and matter work. And when we understand those things, we can do things that look like miracles. So he included those, but he had his own little take, and he would say, oh, these psychic powers, well, they are essentially mundane. You can do those without any real understanding of awakening. And in fact, he forbade his monks and nuns from displaying these powers for the purpose of gaining followers or gaining requisites or anything like that. Although the texts do show him using them at times when they would be effective. But instead, the message he said again and again was the real power of the mind is to come to the end of suffering. to have a mind that is free of greed, hatred, and delusion, that is real power. So he was clear about that. So in our society, we also have various arenas where we exercise power. And it's interesting to note, just reflecting on this, that some of what we can do through modern science and modern psychology mimic some of the so-called supernormal powers that are named in the text. So, things like radio and television and satellite technology do allow us to see and hear things that are far away that we could never access otherwise. How are you listening to this talk? This would appear magical to somebody in ancient India. We can manipulate materials in ways that they could not even fathom. And through our modern understanding of the mind and psychology, we can also touch people's minds in ways that might have appeared almost like coming from meditative strength to somebody from that society. Now, we have not, with our mundane scientific and psychological techniques, we haven't tapped into the full power of the mind. But some of this is pretty interesting in terms of power, just basic power. We have a lot of mundane power in this world compared to then. Sometimes it's directed well, and sometimes it's not, as we know, quite harmfully. It can be directed. But the Buddha didn't shy away from the idea of power. He didn't say, oh, because this is dangerous, you should just not do any of that, just sit peacefully and never do anything except that. But he was clear about what he meant by spiritual power. And he gave these clear indications of how we can begin to use our energy and our vitality for the path. So when we practice informed by wise view, wise mindfulness, wise intention, and all the other factors, we can use the inspirational energies of our heart and our mind to lead us into the full potential of our practice. That means that we can live from a place of non-suffering, non-struggle, non-stress. We may be very much engaged with the activities of life, with doing the things that we can do with our vital power while we have it, because it doesn't last forever. But the mind would do these things with so much internal strength that it can't be shaken. And when we've directed our practice toward having these internal bases of power, then we find that things don't exert power over us so much. We're not pushed around, for example, by our greed, our hatred, and our delusion. That is real strength, to be in the world with the power of a mind that is not under those kinds of influences. Nothing exerts power over a free mind. So whether your interest is in broadening your practice to encompass more of your life, to connect with more of your life, or in deepening your practice to discover some of the more profound sides of the teachings, these four bases of spiritual power can enhance that. They can bring the Dharma more and more into your life. So wholesome desire, full energy, wholeheartedness, and keen investigation. I hope all of these will enliven you and also be for benefit to others around you and to the whole world. The world needs the strength and power of the Dharma right now. It has a lot of other dissipations of its energy, shall we say. So these kinds of power that we can bring through practice is really very much needed. And I wish you all very well in that. May there be peace.